a little quick brief before. I happened to luckily be in Minneapolis the day that everything hit the fan on Thursday, when all the riots started, the city burned down. Um, and I was there for a destination wedding. I was very fortunate to be there at the right time. I grabbed my camera, ran out to the front lines, and I spent about 7 days there, a little more, a little less, I don't remember, but capturing everything on the front lines that I could. And I kept going back to my hotel room and seeing a very different narrative on the news, and I just felt a calling to show the truth that I was seeing every day. And I'm not political. I don't like politics. I don't like things that are divisive. And so I decided to just give people a camera and give them a voice and let them tell their story. And it was a lot more positive than what I was seeing anywhere else. And it was a lot more community oriented. People were a lot more together than what we were seeing. So I wanted to show that to the world. So I came back and was here for a few days. I went to Mexico for a few days to really recharge. It's very overwhelming to me on an emotional level. And so then I came back recharged, and we're in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, about maybe 5.5 hours from Seattle. And Seattle was really an epicenter of something else that was big, that was started because of this, which was originally Chaz, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and then it turned into CHOP. And so I was back here. I was trying to take a few days to recharge, and I was just kind of watching. President Trump let out a tweet that if the mayor didn't stop everything, that he would invade and bring people in to help her, kind of kick the protesters out. So I saw a lot of rising tensions, and when things kept heating up more and more, I just knew I had to go. I wanted to see the true story of what was happening again. And so I left for Seattle about a week ago, a little bit more than a week ago, and ended up spending about a week there. And after a couple days of being there, it was just bigger and more intimate and more complex and just stranger than I expected. And so I called Jack Wade, and asked him to come join me. And like a good friend, he came the next morning, and we ended up spending the next few days together. So I've been to a lot of places in the world. I've seen a lot of interesting situations. This was a very complex, almost a worldly situation, all within a few blocks, a close proximity together. So it's kind of like the whole world mashed into 6 blocks of complex characters, personalities, agendas, people striving for a voice, people that are there for the right reasons, the wrong reasons. And I'll remind you, this is all within a few blocks where police will not come in. This is an autonomous zone. The people were given barricades. They moved those barricades around to block their own area off, and then police will not come in. And so it was really interesting because everyone is in there. You don't really know if everyone's in there for the right reasons. You don't know who people are. Most people have masks on. Most people have their face covered up. There's a lot of anonymity in it. And so you have to be able to read intuitively the situations so well to make sure that you're not careless or stupid, because again, there's no one to protect you until you build those relationships. And so that's what ended up happening. And so I'll just start with when I got there, and then we'll bring in with once Jack came in, because I really want to hear a different perspective too and what he saw. So the first night I got there, I got there at night. I don't like going into these situations at night. Very different dynamics a lot of times. At night you have a lot more kind of rising tensions. People are tired. You have some emotions that are strained. At night you also have a little more drugs and alcohol in certain situations like this, possibly. There's a lot of homelessness, and at night you're kind of masked by the cloak of darkness, and people just behave a little bit differently at night. And I think people feel a little more invisible, so like they can sometimes get away with more. So I rarely do this, but since I didn't get there until about 10 o'clock, I didn't get to my hotel till about 10 o'clock, and then I wanted to get in my car and head right out to the situation So I got to CHOP at about 10:30, and I literally had zero idea about anything outside of it just being an autonomous zone. And so I just Google mapped CHOP. Thankfully, there's a Google map. It took me there. I parked outside of it and I walked right in. And what I walked into was, I mean, so I walked in. There's concrete barriers. You walk in, on the concrete barriers is a sign that lists out their demands. Um, their demands were, first and foremost, it was that the police funding in Seattle for SPD was decreased by 50%. They wanted people to display their badge number. They wanted the mayor to end the curfew. They wanted to stay under the Department of Justice consent decree. Both these first two got accomplished before we arrived. And we arrived also about 3 weeks into CHOP being established also. So that's important to remember. And then people wanted that 50% of the funding to be reallocated towards mental health and social services. They didn't just want to take the money off the table. So that's important to remember also. And so, yeah, so when I walked in, you just walk past these barricades and it's just wide open. You have a co-op on the side that has, I needed a mask when I walked in. They're right there with masks, gloves, everything you could possibly need, food, water, Gatorade, feminine products. And so everything's set up in the beginning. There's lots of wonderful people there, just there to talk and very kind and making sure you're okay. And then you immediately go into tents that start, and all these tents surround the East Precinct, which the protesters took over, but very different than in Minneapolis. In Minneapolis, the protesters burned the precinct to the ground, and the police ran in their cars, and then once they left, they burned it to the ground, to nothing being left. Here, they didn't do that. They took it over, they graffitied the walls outside of it, but then they stayed outside of it. Some people did go in. There was some riot gear we heard that was stolen, and there's small things like that, but there was conflicting reports that the building was open and that it wasn't open. And the majority of reports was that it was open, but people were trying to not tell people that it was open because they didn't want anyone to go inside because they were trying to minimize the reasons that police would come in and affect anything in the situation. And so, so then there's just a hodgepodge of people in the middle of this think of the letter I. You kind of have a long line and you have a long middle line and then another long line. And I was at the top line in the middle of that. So there's kind of two different epicenters. And in this, there was just, there's people standing around, lots of people talking, lots of people sharing stories. Again, I was there, I was just really reading the situation and people. You have lots of different races, black, white, old, young. Most people were, I would say, 21 and older. I didn't see many people under 21, even though I definitely did. We saw a few. More in the daytime than at night. And then you have everyone's kind of standing around, everyone's kind of having conversations. Things were peaceful, and nothing really stood out to me that much. I didn't even know how far the zone extended at the time, so I was kind of sitting at the one spot. There's people playing music, and then there was kind of a steel band that had started, and it was just random people. A guy with the trumpet, a guy with the tuba, a guy with drums, and everyone kind of came together and was playing music, and it was a very nice, energetic kind of setting, and it was a good start to everything. And so I was walking around, and I heard the next song that they started playing be Rage Against the Machine. I forget what song it is, but it's Fuck You, I Won't Do What You Tell Me. And so it was a very heated, very passionate song. I thought it was cool, but I also kind of felt that song was going to bring a lot of energy to this circle. There's probably, 25 to 35 people in this circle. And so it did, and everyone got very, very passionate. Everyone's screaming, "Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me." It's a very anti-authority song. and this is just this little circle, and it heated up, heated up, heated up, and the song kind of came at an end. And as the song was coming to an end, people were still kind of reeling from the energy from that song. And then I just noticed complete chaos next to me. And I just saw a bunch of people making a bunch of noise, bunch of people, you know, saying what happened, or who did this, or whatever. And I looked over and I saw a taller white gentleman laying on the ground, and he had blood coming out of his mouth, and he was pretty knocked out. I think he was completely knocked out, but coming to it at the point when I noticed him. People were running up to help him real quick, and then, you know, you have another 10 or 15 people that are holding a black gentleman back and saying, you know, why'd you do this? And the gentleman said he was trying to start a fire, and everyone said he was holding an umbrella. Why would you, he's not trying to start a fire. And then everyone's trying to help the guy on the ground. Everyone's trying to keep this other guy separated from him. And it was pandemonium. And then that was the first time when I saw this gentleman that came in. He had a white tank top on, and he was kind of in between and holding this guy back also. And then I looked over and I saw that this guy was heavily armed. He had 2 guns on him, and he had a baton on him, and he had bear spray in his back pocket. And so once I saw that, the whole time I was in Minneapolis in every situation, I never once saw a single gun outside of being on police or National Guard. So I saw that. I had a feeling that that would be there, but it was just very wide out open. And so because of that, I just understood there's a very different dynamic that I had to understand better. And so this situation kind of, you know, and then the guy's laying on the ground. Everyone's yelling for medics. And then I noticed how many people have radios. So multiple people are talking on radios. And then I pull out my camera immediately and I start filming. And as soon as I'm filming, people stand in front of my camera. And so I move around. I figured they didn't even notice me. And as I move around, they're moving in front of me also to block my camera from filming it. And I kind of moved around. I got the shot. But then everyone said, turn off your camera. You can't film. Turn off your camera. And so I turned it off for how tense the situation is. And then people yelled for medics. Medics came in. He made everyone stop talking so that he could hear the guy on the ground. And then as he's trying to restore order and get everyone to be peaceful, there's a guy that steps in front of everybody, and he's got a bulletproof jacket, but I don't know if he had the plates in it or not. It might have just been for show, but it said Sentinel on it, and on the back it said everything's fine. And he had radios on him, and so that was when I fully understood the complexity of all the different dynamics in here and how they'd really established their own society here with police and medics and security and all these things together. So I spent another 10-15 minutes there, watch that whole situation. I walked down to the end of the other side. I just had to get out of that situation. I walked down the kind of the middle of it. I noticed a soccer field. There's hundreds of tents on the soccer field. Lots of people just out and about, you know, people making food. I kind of looked at that. I walked and as I'm walking down towards the soccer field, I noticed this guy there's very few people out, and this is probably close to midnight now. And this guy goes running past me in a camo jacket, but he's kind of like, he's not running very smoothly. And, I look over at him, he makes a turn, and I notice he's got a rifle that's the size of his body, pretty much, like a 4-foot rifle, and he's trying to run with it, and people are saying, hey, just, you know, run carefully. And I think it was a girl, could be wrong about this, she had a helmet on, knee pads. They talked for a second, and then they all ran up back to where that conflict was at the front. So I went where he ran from, and when I got down there, I noticed a lot more armed men. There was maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 guys there was a minivan that had 6, 7 guys in it. It was a purple minivan. The door opened. All the guys inside the minivan had ARs, and there's one bigger gentleman that he got out and he had pistols in his hoodie sleeve in the front. And so these guys are just walking around. They're all staying at one end. and they are walking around with their ARs. They're not worried in any possible way. They're not hiding it in any possible way. And no one's even afraid of it. No one's saying anything about it. They're kind of just roaming freely. And so I stand at the corner to kind of just look at the situation. I was not courageous enough to, or not stupid enough to try to take a picture of it. I was kind of reading the situation. And the situation that really got me was as I was standing at the soccer field, I noticed a younger member of this crew that got in this bush, and he was a guy with the AK, and he got in this bush, and he was pointing through the fence, and they were pointing at this alley, and the alley was outside of the chop zone, and so it's on the outside of the fence, and so there's a restaurant there, there's apartments right there, and they're all facing this alley. And there's 2 cars that came down this alley in the time that I was there, which is a span of maybe 15 minutes. And both of them, they raised their guns. They made the driver stop. They had the driver get out of the car. A guy approached the car and had the driver get out. When the guy got out, they checked him for gang tattoos, affiliations. They talked to him. And then if they didn't have anything, they made him turn the opposite direction and drive the opposite way. Again, this alleyway was outside of the chop zone, so this made the situation very interesting. And these guys are doing this, and there's no police, there's no anything. These guys are just roaming and under the lights in a very well-populated part of the city. That was really interesting to me. The second driver didn't stop as quickly. That was very tense. There's lots of screaming. I thought shots were going to go off. And so as I'm standing there, I finally did take my camera up. I raised it. I got some pictures through the fence of people stopping the cars. And the second I did that, a guy came up to me, one of the members, and he said, "Hey, who are you with?" And I said, "I'm not with anyone. This is something I learned in Minneapolis to make sure they need to know that you're not with any news organization, because there's a lot of demonizing through big media outlets, of course." And so I said, "I'm by myself, I'm freelance, this is all just kind of my own thing." And he said, "Okay." And he was very nice to me. He just said, "Hey, I just want you to know that you're in an active fire situation. There was a murder last night here." And yeah, I should mention there's a murder, I think 3 or 4 nights in a row at this point. And so there was a murder last night. And there's a retaliation coming. We know that it's coming, and you're in a situation where it's an active fire situation, and there will be crossfire. So you have to know that going into this, and just where you're sitting." And he said, "No worries," and he walked away. So as soon as I heard that, I stayed another 5 seconds, and then I got out of there. And when I was going up the road, there was what I will still say was a firework for sure. Lots of people that were running away from that area said it was a gunshot. Some thought it was a firework. We'll never know for sure. But the important part of that is that the next morning when I went back to the same location, there's a memorial set up. There's flowers all over the sidewalk. There's pictures. And I started asking everyone what happened. And they said there was a murder last night. And one of the youngest members, a guy named Lorenz, a 19-year-old member of this gang, was murdered, and he was murdered about 50 feet or less from exactly where I was sitting when the guy told me that it was an active fire situation, and it happened less than 2 hours after I left. So this is what I walked into in Chaz and Chop, and it really got the ball rolling as far as how complex the situation was. So real quick, the next day I went back. I tried to film. I tried to just talk to people. I ask people always, of course, before I film or get pictures, "Hey, can I get some of your story and spend some time getting to know you?" And I was blocked by almost everybody. I had one great conversation with a guy named King who said no. And then I said, "Hey, what if I don't even film and we just talk?" And he said, "Okay." And we talked for a while, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And he got a call from a college that he was trying to get into. And so I let him take the call, but then I came back to check on him, and I said, "Hey, I just wanted to know if you got into college." And he said, "Yeah, I don't know yet, but thanks so much for asking." And he said, "Hey, you can film me." He said, "You can get my story. It's okay." So there's a lot of these moments where I understood through these that this was not a situation I was able to just walk in and put a camera on and give people a voice. In Minneapolis, everyone was together, all races, all ages, and everyone was open to the idea of having a voice. And so here, journalism was kind of demonized in the sense that there was no trust, very minimal to no trust towards any journalist at all. First question everyone's asked you is, who are you with? They need to know that you're not with anyone. And everyone that was there kind of was with someone. And so then they ask that, and then there's a very strong desire for everyone in there to stay anonymous. They didn't trust what the police were going to do. They saw a lot of the protesters were being arrested after the protests in Minneapolis and stuff, so people didn't want their identity to get out in any possible way. And so it was extremely complex. And then we also had a sadder side of it where there's a lot of segregation. I struggled a lot as being a white just male that was trying to ask these questions because I had just inherent distrust because of that. I had these two females who turned out to be two of the leaders of kind of another group that they were starting there. And I asked them I said, hey, can I spend some time and talk with you? And they said no. And I said, do you mind if I ask why? And they said, yeah, because you're a white male. And I said, isn't that what we're doing here? We're here to not be segregated. And I said, how about this? I'm just going to put my camera away, not film or record anything. And how about we just talk? And they wouldn't do that. And that bothered me a lot. And because that's the reason we're there, is to come together. And to show segregation back was not something that was going to help us make progress. And so the last thing I'll say, the culmination was I kept striking down. These are hard interviews to get with people. And I just thought it was a wasted maybe attempt to even try to do this. And so that night that evening I was walking back up the street, and one of the guys who I noticed in a lot of these tense situations, who was kind of leader of security there, the guy that was pretty heavily armed, that had the pistols on him with a white tank top in the first night, he was given a impromptu interview to a guy that was on the street. And so the guy was filming, and I let him film, and I finally stepped in and I said, hey, do you mind if I just piggyback behind you and get some video behind the same story? And they were kind of taken off guard by it, but they said, yeah, that's fine, okay. And they kept talking. Well, the guy who was filming, his producer walked over and he said, hey, I need you here now. And he walked away. And so this guy, who we learned later his name was Rick, Rick was just standing there, and I was like, no, I was like, keep going. It was so passionate. I was like, keep giving me that talk. And so he gave me the interview I was just lucky in the right place. And we started talking. I filmed him for a bit, but really we were just talking, and we just hit it off. We had this great conversation. We really connected on a lot of things that we're talking about. And I asked him, I told him, hey, you got to tell me the dynamic in here. I'm not getting trusted by anyone. And he explained that. And that video is up on the YouTube channel, of him explaining that, and how no one knows you, and the media keeps shitting on everyone inside. But we had a great conversation. A lot of it was off camera. It was very friendly. It was what I was hoping for. And then at the end of it, he said, look, everyone in here is going to see you talking with me. Because they see me talking with you, they're going to trust you because of that. But he said, just in case, here's my card. He said, if anyone gives you trouble inside here, show them this card, tell them I vouch for you, and they're going to trust you because of that. And he said, also, this is my number, and if you need anything, if you're in danger, if you're concerned, or anything that happens inside, call me and I'll come help. And so from there, he gave me immunity to be inside, especially around him and everything. And that was a huge moment because of that immunity. I went back, I called Jack, and I said, Jack, you got to be here. This has got huge. And you got to remember that almost no one else is being trusted in there, especially with filming. And so even as these situations continue to unfold, even with that immunity, people step in front of the camera quickly. And it takes someone like Rick or some of the other people that we ended up meeting that would immediately say, no, they're okay. They can be here. And I want to give a shout out to Tabitha because she had a great idea to make shirts for us. And the shirt said freelance. and on the back said "Here to help." And so we just kind of made that our uniform. We lived in these shirts for a few days. We smelled terrible. We wore them every day. So whenever people would look at us filming, they would see freelance, and we'd get an extra second of trust because of that. And then each day by day, we got more trust with the family and the community inside. And these are all the people that were in all the major situations. And with that trust, Jack got in the car at 5:30 in the morning, and he got there the next day. And I'm gonna let him take over for a little bit and kind of talk about. We met at the hotel the next morning. I think it was Wednesday, if you remember. And I briefed him on it for a little bit, but I just said there's no better instructor than just getting into it. And so we packed up all our stuff and we headed into CHOP, and we ended up walking into a very chaotic situation, which I think was the best thing for to kind of show Jack a very interesting side of CHOP that needed to be known.
So I got into CHOP on Wednesday at probably around 3:00.
Mm-hmm.
I got into Seattle, and this was also my first time being in Seattle at all, besides driving through. So quite the introduction into Seattle. So we showed up into CHOP around 3:00, and so what is the difference between CHOP and Chaz?
It was essentially they
read interchangeably.
It was Chaz in the beginning, and they made a formal decision to rename it and call it the actual one.
What was Chaz?
Chaz was Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
Autonomous Zone, and then
CHOP was Capitol Hill. I don't know what the. Capitol Hill Organized
Protest,
yeah.
Okay.
So semantics.
So
occupied protest. Capitol Hill occupied protest.
We showed up into Capitol Hill occupied protest at around 3:00, and immediately we go into. We park. We walk in, and I found it very odd because. So a little bit of backstory. I know almost nothing about what's going on in Seattle. I've roughly heard about what's going on in the news, and basically had the idea that there was this protest and that part of the city was blocked off. That was basically all I had going into it. And then, so I pretty much started with a clean slate as far as going into this, and not really having a bias on or like an idea on what was already happening there. So I kind of started off fresh. So I didn't think it would be that easy to just like walk in there, but we parked about a block from the barrier, and then we just walked in, and they have their concrete barriers and then some wooden panels that are set on the kind of the tops of these barriers to make them a little taller. All of them are decorated with graffiti and art. A lot of them are painted actually very pretty. And so we walk straight in, and Adam is kind of showing me some things here and there. I'm getting an idea of the size of what's going on and kind of figuring out the location a little bit more. And we are there for not even 10 minutes. He's trying to introduce me to people, and then Adam, he points out a character. His name is Rick. Yeah. He points out a guy named Rick, and he goes, "That's the guy that is helping us with a lot of the security's trust around here." And I go, "Okay." And we're kind of walking around the corner, and then Rick notices some problem going on inside the archway of the police station there. And so I get out my camera. This is pretty much the first time I hit record. I pull my camera up, I'm recording, and not really sure what's going on. I'm just kind of capturing it to capture it. And as being a videographer in kind of like a field situation, is you always want your camera rolling whether or not you're capturing anything important, because you never know if you're going to have a really non-important build-up to something that's actually going to be very important, and you're going to wish you had hit record 2 seconds before it actually happened. So half the time we're recording almost just day-to-day conversation to people, people walking around and hoping that, you know, we catch something as it happens. And in this case, this guy is walking in, and someone's arguing about something, and then this guy comes out of their archway of the police station, and he is pissed. He's super angry, and I don't know at what point he was angry at Rick, but
no, hold on. There's one part with this before. I don't want to interrupt, but we saw at the entrance to the police station, there was a lot of chaos, and these situations happen all the time, but there's a lot of ruckus, and there's maybe like 10, 15 people, and Rick was over there, and I saw Rick. I wanted to go introduce Jack to Rick, and so I walked over real quick into this chaos, and I noticed that a guy had gotten punched in the face, probably by Rick, and he is sitting on the step, and they're saying, "Why'd you punch him in the face?" Or you didn't deserve it, or whatever. And Rick's just like walking away from the situation and then walking back into the street. And here's where the pissed off guy came in.
So this guy, he comes out, coming after Rick, and the way this situation looked like it was going down was that Rick was there to quote unquote keep the peace in this area of the CHOP, the kind of this corner block. I don't know what streets they were, but it was kind of the larger part that was set up near the co-op, which is this area where they had food set up for people to come and get food, or masks or gloves or first aid. So we're around this corner, and this guy comes out after Rick, and Rick is got a lot of energy, and he is very passionate about what he's doing there, and being the
it's a good word for
head
it.
of security. And so he comes out, and he has got beef with Rick immediately, and they are both just yelling at each other.
Well, this guy is big. He's like got a gold chain. He's got no shirt on. He's
been
just
hitting the gym,
and he's like grinding his teeth. And this guy looks
angry.
Business. Yeah.
And so he's yelling at Rick. Rick is yelling back at him. You know, you don't want to do this. They're both angry at each other, and there's people in the middle holding each other back.
And the guy kept talking about Rick's guns. He's go, "What is that?" You go, "Is that a Beretta? That's a Beretta."
Yeah,
he keeps talking about the guns.
Part on video, and he's commenting on his weapons. And my camera's out at this point, and I'm at the point now where I'm like getting told a lot to put my camera away, to stop filming. But this is exactly why we're here, is to capture things as they're happening and not have a bias and censor certain things. Because if you go into a situation and you go, "Oh, I'm not filming that, I'm filming this, I'm not filming that, and this is what I want to film," then you're going to, with a bias, just like anyone would be with a news station. If you're, we're just going to show the bad stuff, or we're just going to try to get a good story for, you know, Wednesday, Tuesday, and then the rest of the weekend's just going to be crazy net stories. We're filming everything, whether or not it's good or bad.
This is tense because there's guns and...
And so not everybody that you walk into knows that. We're just some guy with a camera, and they don't know that. So they're telling you to stop filming, have some respect, and things like that. But we're there with a purpose, and
show the truth.
To show the truth, yeah. Anyway, this is my first time being in there in this tense situation, so people are telling me to not film, and I'm like, okay. And there's a couple times where I put my camera down for a bit, and then the person's kind of gone, so I put my camera back up, and so
the guy's backing up.
Rick's backing up. They head around the corner. Rip whips out his baton.
Yeah, baton.
He's got this like cracking baton that kind of snaps.
Well, this is like maybe the most restrained I've seen out of Rick, especially over the next few days, because he's backing up. This guy's coming straight at Rick, like flexing. The guy looks roided out. And Rick just keeps saying, "Why is he coming at me? Why is he coming at me?" And Rick wants to pull his gun, but he's holding back on it. And he's got probably 5-6 people in front. And so then Rick whips out the baton, and that drives the guy crazy.
And he goes, "Oh, so you're going to whip out a baton on me now? Things are getting more serious." So then the other guy gets more angry, and he's trying to fight him. and people are still holding them back. And there's if it wasn't for those people holding them back, I think they would have gotten into some serious trouble.
There would have been shots fired for sure.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
And then shortly after that, I kind of make my way to the other side of them to get a different angle, and just as I'm turning around, you can hear a weapon was pulled and cocked back on one of his pistols. And I turn around, I was like, oh shit, well, this is going to get really serious. Turn around, he did not have his weapon pointed at him, but he had it out and he was ready.
And I'll say Rick is not opposed to firing, not at the person, but there was a situation just the day before where a guy came at Rick with a knife, and Rick fired 2 shots into the sky, kind of as warning shots, and it worked. So we didn't really know what Rick was capable of.
And yeah, he's not afraid to pull the trigger.
He's not afraid to pull the trigger.
Whether or not it's on a person or not, he's still going to pull the trigger.
He's going to protect himself.
Yeah, so he pulls the gun out. And that just drives the other guy nuts.
Yeah, you'd think the guy would run. The guy
you'd think the guy would be like, okay, well, this is where I brought a fist to a gunfight.
Yeah.
I'm going to head out. But his ego must have gotten in the way, and so he kept wanting to fight, and he goes, oh, you have a gun now. And they got into it more. And then
the guy's still coming at Rick, even with his guns drawn.
The guy's still coming, and then he's bouncing around, and I feel like at some point he was trying to piss him off enough to where he would use the gun, and then the other guy would have all right to go nuts over him, because at that point you're protecting your own life.
Yeah, and I want to say that there's another side of this. When these situations happen, you got 10 people yelling at Rick, don't pull the fucking trigger, don't give them the narrative, don't do that, and everyone's telling him, put your gun away, so Rick's got someone, and then they're yelling at this other guy, stop charging. The guy was agitating the situation. Rick was backing up. And he was trying to just get away from it.
So
Rick's backing up.
And then at this point,
guns out.
There's a woman in front of me, and she keeps walking. She's trying to be very subtle, walking in between the action and me, not looking at me, but just subtly being in the way all the time. Obviously, it's not just like hand in front of the camera, stop filming. It was a very like
deliberate,
calm and soft way to block someone, you know? I think if you were to like straight up cover someone's camera and do that kind of thing, like that's gonna piss the videographer off or whoever's filming. It's, you know, it's also gonna get your point across that you don't want to film. So I thought it was kind of interesting that someone, and a lot of the times people would just kind of try to be in the way so something wasn't filmed, rather than like starting up agitating the situation. Anyway, so this is happening, and I'm just trying to keep moving, and I got the shot the whole time. She wasn't really in the way, but she was trying. And then at some point, she turns around and is like, stop filming, like, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. And I gave her a short little spiel. I was like, no, blah, blah, blah. We're trying to film everything. Anyway, she kind of gave up after a while. I was filming, and then I don't know what happened, but they took off, and they went across the street to another area. We were in shade, now we're just out in this bright hot sun, and I don't know what's going on. He's over there, I don't even really know what's going on at this point.
We got separated.
And at this point, Adam had gone into the action. At this point, I myself am like, okay, well, I don't want to be filming. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I feel like I'm filming them, and it's pissing them off. I'm a videographer, and so I always want to be as close as I can to the subject so you can get the detail, you can hear what's going on. But in this situation, it felt like being too close was going to agitate someone and piss somebody off, and this was a very heated situation. So
this is a common theme throughout the entire time at CHOP, not just this one situation.
Yeah, so this was, for the 3 days that I was there, it was continuously like that. So it's trying to get the shot and be respectful in a way, but also not get in it too much to where you are just pissing somebody off.
Well, and again, let's finish that story, and then we'll talk about that, because that's an important theme. Yeah. So everyone's over on the other corner.
yeah, they move across the street. My camera is down at this point because I am feeling like I am pushing too many buttons. However, looking back in retrospect, I totally could have had my camera out the whole time. I got a lot more comfortable with that as the days that I spent there progressed. And I think a lot of that also came with earning a lot of people's respect around there. But being fresh into it, I knew nobody.
Yeah, you walked into the situation.
Yeah, this is the first 10 minutes I'm there, right?
And now this is built into maybe 50 people now of just chaos and madness, and guns are out, and batons are out.
Screaming. There's women and not children, but all kinds of people just in the street going nuts.
There's that one skinny black guy that rips his shirt off, and he's trying to protect Rick, and he's standing in front, and he starts to fight.
Rick still has his gun out, and then at some point, the other guy pulls out brass knuckles.
Well, that was interesting because before even, so like everyone runs across the street, pure chaos, everyone's screaming, and then this guy's still coming to Rick. Rick's kind of getting pushed with the crowd at this point, and then this other guy steps in front, and he's just telling them to stop what he's doing, stop agitating, stop charging Rick, stop charging Rick. Well, this guy, now those two people are fighting, and I remember the original guy with the chain that started this whole thing is being pushed way back, and this guy's jumping up on barricades. He's trying to get at this guy no matter what, and this guy's maybe half of the size of the first guy that started this. Well, and this guy's coming at him, and he's trying to get a punch off, and I'm like, this guy's insane. There's no way. This guy's roided out who he's against and everything. Well, then everyone screams out, he has brass knuckles, he has brass knuckles, and then it makes sense. And he gets like 2 or 3 punches off with the brass knuckles on.
Did he?
And, yeah. And
on Rick?
No, on that. He was protecting Rick. This is skinny guy protecting Rick.
I did not know that he had actually swung with those.
Yeah. He got in, and it was when they were on the sidewalk across the street where Rick then pulled out the bear mace and everything.
Yeah, and that's where I came in again. The guy that was the buff guy that was causing a problem. I looked up, and he just had the orange bear mace all over his face. And at that point, he turned and ran down the street and was gone.
Yeah,
and you could tell him, you could hear him running like 2 blocks away, just.
Well, and this guy was so whatever. I don't know if he was on something. He didn't look. He didn't like fucked up on drugs something, but he might have been on something. Yeah, but he had so much power, and just nothing was stopping him. No conversation was working. Mm-hmm. The guy wouldn't listen to anyone. He was just a brick wall. It didn't matter. He'd have 10 people holding him back. And so even then, this other guy's tried to fight him. This guy got a few punches off with the brass knuckles. Didn't phase this guy at all. He's still coming at him. Well, Rick's still right there, and that's when Rick had seen enough. And Rick always has bear spray in his back pocket. So thankfully, instead of the gun, Rick decides to pull the bear spray out. And he literally hits this guy in the face with bear spray, which would destroy any living human. And he hits this guy with his bear spray, and the guy makes a bunch of noise and just runs off. Like, not blinded or anything, this guy. So to give you an idea of how much energy or adrenaline, or maybe it was on something. But unfortunately, another innocent bystander got hit with bear spray, and what happened to him should have happened to the original guy. This guy was on the ground. Medics were on him immediately. They're pouring milk on his face. The guy's totally blinded. He's just in a heap. I mean, he can't breathe. He can't see. Totally blind. And meanwhile, the other guy just runs off, and we're trying to figure out what happened. I'm in 2 parts. I want to protect Jack because I just got him in a situation, while also making sure that we're aware of our situations. And then word comes to the crowd that guy went to go get his pistol, or he said he's going to get his gun. Mm-hmm. And so then I walked up to Jack right away and said, Jack, they're saying he went to go get his gun, and we're going to just stand back to see what happens, because we're not leaving the situation, but we're going to make sure we see it coming from a long way away if there's going to be shots fired. And thankfully, he never came back with the gun.
And to keep in mind, the medics are not EMTs. They're not anybody in uniform. They are just people helping out.
Well, but remember, we were filming the guy getting milk on his face, mm-hmm. and then they were blocking our cameras the whole time. This is even after the immunity with Rick, but no one else really knew us except Rick. And so Rick was in chaos. He wasn't able to vouch for us. And then the one kid said, or the guy said, hey, we're blocking you because some of these guys are doctors, are professionals, but they're volunteering their time, but they could lose their job if their faces are shown. So we're blocking. I don't know if that's a true story or not, but that's the story that one guy gave us as to why they're blocking us.
So that concludes the first 15 minutes of in the chat. And, it was a very eye-opening 15 minutes, showing you got to be on your toes and you can't be naive in a situation like that. And
Yeah, and to Jack, it's like I put him in a situation. I like these unknown situations because they're very dynamic. You really are just watching characters and faces and trying to read intentions very, very quickly. But I feel a very like subtle call to protect Jack or to make sure Jack knows what's actually happening and going on. And but I also wanted Jack to be filming because that's what he was there for. And so I also wanted to see how Jack acted in that situation. And sorry to put you right into boot camp in the first 15 minutes, but that was when we had that talk, and I was like, always filming no matter what. And you were on a glide cam, thankfully, which helped you to be able to just hold and film no matter what. And so that was a great introduction to. Really, you got a mix of all the dynamic personalities and situations in that first 15
definitely.
minutes.
It shows you, and I think going headfirst into something a lot of the times is the best way to go, instead of just kind of gradually getting in and being comfortable.
Yep.
It is just to kind of get in the action and get the right idea of what's going on. But so that was the first little bit, and then as the day progressed, like we met a lot more people. Actually, we talked to Rick and we interviewed him a couple times. Really got to listen to the things he had to say, and he's a very passionate guy, and so he is always on top energy. We met a couple other people. We kind of toured around the entire CHOP, which is composed of these couple blocks of barricades, where they have the co-op, and then some tents are along there, and just kind of like cat a corner to this. They have the, was that a baseball field?
Soccer field, yeah.
Soccer field.
Yeah.
They have this field, and then on the other side of the field is a large homeless population.
Well, it was a mix. It was lots of mixtures. We don't know a percentage, but I would say maybe 70-30. 30 being homeless, but 70 being people that were there to occupy.
Okay.
And then these were people that had they had started their own gardening. They had started growing their own vegetables. They were in it for the long run. But you had that mix of homelessness in it that added kind of an unknown factor in the situation, because obviously with homelessness you have mental health issues, you have drug issues, you have poverty issues, you have all these different issues mixed in with the group. And then the tent situation was extremely wary of any cameras any time. If you filmed anything, people were in your face, people were either yelling at you or making you feel terrible about it, or very, very anonymous in the situation. So, and we ended up hearing from one of the leaders, David, that someone had made a post on 4chan. Dear God, I didn't even know people still use 4chan. And they think it was a police officer, but they really don't know. But had said, hey, to all the homeless, make flyers, tell everyone to go to CHOP and to bring their tents there. There's going to be free food. There's going to be free drinks. There's going to be free services. And they think that they really did that because it flooded them with homelessness in a situation where they were already relying on the donations for food and for tents, and they needed a lot of help. And then they got flooded with hundreds of homeless people. Seattle's got a terrible situation with homelessness already. And all these people came to CHOP to overwhelm them. Well, David said we took this as an opportunity to help feed more people, to help more people with the services we could. And so CHOP ended up really proving themselves and ended up being able to feed all the homeless and take care of the homeless to the best of their abilities. And it really showed much more of a humanitarian side of the people inside of CHOP. But that story was getting lost all the time.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was very interesting because you have this cause that is the Black Lives Matter movement and this protest going on. And then you also have the homeless population that is kind of piggybacked onto this movement. And so it adds a really interesting dynamic because I think to any bystander and anyone just listening on the news to what's going on, you're just going to get a sliver. And a lot of times that sliver is just the cover of that book. And the cover of the book is homeless population that is mentally unsound, and there's a lot of violence going on. And that's the cover of the book. But you have to spend some time there. And I mean real time, where you're spending hours like we did, to figure out what's really going on. And I spent 3 days. You spent how many? 5?
6, 7, I think.
7?
Yeah.
You spent that much time, and then we've come to a understanding of somewhat of what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But to anyone that just barely sees it, is walking on the street, and that's actually something you can do, is just walk through there and
Mm-hmm.
witness it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you just get that little sliver, you're going to make an assumption of something that's
Mm-hmm.
probably pretty wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of what people are coming to the conclusion on.
Well, it's dramatic, and it's people are looking for the stress, and they're looking for the chaos, and they're looking for the fighting, and that's why people were so wary, especially of us in the very beginning, and me in the very beginning, because they would see us filming a fight or filming a violent situation or unrest, but they wouldn't see the other 50 times where I'm filming a peaceful conversation, or I'm filming people playing a sport, or trying to really give that base. And that's what really took us time. And so we had some of the leaders who we would break through, and with Jack I wanted to really like show the side of how much behind the scenes there is of communication with these people. Of we're not filming, we're not getting video, we're not getting audio. There's no reason other than just to build that relationship. And we would go up and we would spend half an hour talking to someone and not film any part of it. Sometimes I'd say, I'm going to pull out my camera, and they would say, no filming. I'd say, no worries, and we'd continue our talk. So really reinforcing that we're there to learn, we're there to understand, we're there to empathize. We're not just there to paint a narrative. We're not even just there to get famous. We're not there to get, even just this content. We're really there for the right reasons. But you can't tell people that. You have to show that to people in your actions, and so much more it has to be felt. And so a lot of those questions, a lot of those moving parts, we would always, it was the same family and community inside, but as far as media people, you would almost always see new people in there. And then, whenever a dramatic situation would come, cameras would flock all over that. And so it took us time to get the trust that we were in all situations. And I think of the main leader at the end that came up to us on the soccer field, and we couldn't get him to open up to us at all. And he never told us his name. Remember with the glasses? The glasses, so the guy that knew the history so incredibly well. And
yeah,
I got his face right here.
He's a
Yeah.
great guy.
And we spent hours just asking questions about Black history, asking questions about personal experiences.
He was very, very educated,
Extremely
and
smart.
well-informed
Yep.
on all of that. And he'd go, anytime I talk to anybody about this, I always give them the make sure they understand the history on Capitol Hill and blah blah blah. And he would continue on, and I was like, wait. I don't understand any of the history on Capitol Hill. I'd be like, okay, let me explain. And he would give me the whole story. And I got a good understanding of what Capitol Hill was about when he was done. And so he was very educated. And the first time we met him, he was in the middle of a big disagreement between two people, and where there was a lot of loud shouting. And he was in the middle trying to break it up and make sure that nothing happened. And he didn't want us to film him when we were talking to him, so we're like, okay. We just talked to him, and it took, I think it was by the last day we were there, the third day, he's like
2 full days.
Yeah. He's like, you know what, you guys are cool, you're good to film anything candid.
Well, we would sit on the concrete barriers and ask him questions about religion and history and the groups and all the people, and we would talk for hours and be around him for hours and full days together. And he was one of the last ones that just didn't trust us until he had to see more and more. And that's why that was such a big deal. He came up to us on the soccer field on his own volition and approached us just to say, hey, you guys are okay to film. You guys are okay to film me. And you're okay to do, I'm giving you permission and immunity because I've been watching you. And we've been seeing what you're doing and seeing more of the reason you're here. And that was very complex and difficult to get. And I didn't think we'd ever get that. And he was kind of the last piece of that because he was involved in a lot of the meetings, a lot of the keeping the peace and the groups together and stuff.
Yeah, and he was very calm and collected about all of his actions, which was very, very respectable.
Yeah.
We are at 1 hour now.
We're at 1 hour?
We're at 1 hour, yeah.
We're going to have to do like 3 of these today.
I think that summarizes the first couple days you were there and my first day there. Real quick, later that night, the first night we were there was a gentleman who was either heavily intoxicated on some kind of substance, or it was just a mental disorder or a combination of both. Paranoid schizophrenia. He was causing a ruckus, and Rick didn't like it, and so he tried to confront the guy, ended up scaring him off, and he went and hid in a restaurant that was inside the CHOP borders. And the restaurant was still open. They were actually serving people. They had a family that was down for dinner, and the man goes in there to hide. And then Rick tries to go in after him, and they're like, no, listen, we got it. I want you to stay outside. He's obviously going crazy because you're confronting him. And Rick was outside, and I got some interview with him when he was out there. We were trying to film what was going on in the situation, and the restaurant, one of the employees came out and was like, I think the cameras and everything is stirring him up even more. So
stressing him, yeah.
We just sat outside and chilled for a little bit. Well, about a half a block away was where the border ended, and the police were right outside that border, and they couldn't come in. And
they wouldn't come in.
They wouldn't come in. I mean, that's the whole idea of this autonomous zone is it autonomous?
Autonomous.
Autonomous. And so that's the whole point of this, is the police are outside of it. And that's exactly what happened. They were right outside of it, and there was a situation going on in a restaurant that could have ended horribly. Luckily it didn't, but the police were right there, and they wouldn't be able to go in there. And so that's where it's, in the hands of Rick and his security team to handle this situation. And so he's outside just waiting to see what happens. And then later we left.
Before all we watched this guy terrorize this restaurant. All the guests finally left. All the people stopped eating their food. Everyone left. And it's me, you, Rick, that other guy in the tank top. And we're saying, hey, Rick's saying, I'm happy to help, and we'll do it peacefully. We'll get the guy out. The restaurant said no. Well, the guy takes over the whole restaurant. He's on the phone. And then the cooks, and they don't know what to do. And Rick's just saying, what are you going to do? You can't call the police. Police won't come in here. And who are you going to call if you can't call the police? Well, you got to rely on the security team, but they didn't want security team, so it's up to them, but they couldn't handle it themselves. It was a very important awareness to, if you take away the police, how well can people really do?
Mm-hmm. How well are you going to do on your own when you don't have them?
Yeah, and managing.
Yeah, and so we ended up leaving at that point, and he was still in there. I don't know if Rick stayed outside the entire time, but later in the night, we had gone and done some other stuff. We came back, and then at some point, this guy that was in the restaurant that was going nuts got and climbed up on top of, 2 or 3 story building, climbed all the way up on the top of it, and was trying to jump, and people were trying to talk him out of it. And so we stumbled across a situation. They had kind of gotten ladders and were trying to get the guy down. They were telling us, don't film. We don't want to stress this guy out anymore. So we're like, okay, we're not going to film. We put our cameras down, and we just kind of...
They even tried to block us from walking over there.
They didn't want anybody near him.
And as soon as I said, we're going either way, that girl started yelling, Angelica, these guys are coming. And Angelica knew us, and so she wasn't bothered by it.
We talked to her. She was like, okay, it's fine. Like, just don't go in there and try to agitate anything. We're like, okay, that's fine. So we were just there to kind of witness it, kind of step back a little ways. And I can't remember what the guy was saying, but it took them hours, and eventually they had got the guy down. But that was kind of the ending of that night.
We didn't even, as soon as we saw that, we didn't want to add to it, so we left as soon as we saw it. We weren't there to glorify it or to film it even. We were just kind of making sure that everyone was okay, and that's when it also took, we were in all these situations together. It was always the same groups of people on the humanitarian side that was helping people or people together. So that was when we really started noticing everyone's faces, everyone started noticing us, and the situation just got deeper and deeper. And in that situation, they finally got the guy off the roof, and then he just ran off. But it's very enlightening because you can't call the police. And so what are you going to do? How much can you handle in these situations? There's no public services. If that guy jumps off the building, what are they going to do? Ambulances aren't going to come in. Do you bring them outside of the CHOP zone, and then you call the police? You have your own doctors, EMTs inside that are unmasked. You don't know the credentials that people have.
There was an agreement we heard, and I believe this was, it came from the fire chief. He was talking to a woman that was interviewing him. And he said there was agreement that was made that if there is an emergency or there is services that you require by the police or paramedics or fire department, they had a location agreed upon that if there was anything that was an issue, obviously they weren't going to come inside the shop, but if you had something, you had to bring them, and I think it was like 2 or 3 blocks away to this location, and that's where they would meet you.
Which is really far.
Which is really far, and someone gets shot or someone is seriously injured, you have to get that person to that area, and that's the agreement that they made.
We heard that one story, the guy, the mom that was on drugs, and she had a 3-year-old daughter, and they were trying to get the daughter to safety, and no one would help, and they said, you got to bring her 3 blocks out, and the guy said, it's the middle of the night, it's insanely far. And so we really started to see some of the breakdown in communication between CHOP and the outside world, but also the chaos inside. And it's a lot of people that had the right intentions, but I think we're way over their head as far as the complexity of these situations. But we were really being confronted with every possible situation every day, good and bad. It was really incredible. So
absolutely,
more to talk about next time.
And
that's like 10%.
That concludes the first day.
Jeez.